There's a dangerous trap many of us fall into without even realizing it, protecting people from the consequences of their actions, thinking we're doing them a favor. You might believe you're keeping the peace, helping a friend, or preventing someone from failing. But here's the brutal truth. Every time you step in to shield someone from the fallout of their bad decisions, you're making it worse for them and for yourself. This isn't just some abstract concept. Let's be real for a second. How often have you covered for someone at work, excused a friend's constant irresponsibility, or protected someone you care about from dealing with the harsh realities of their own choices? Now, you might feel good in the moment, but let's look at the bigger picture. You're not actually helping. In fact, you're part of the problem. The more you let someone slide, the more they lean on you, and eventually, it's going to break. Take Sisyphus, for example. You've probably heard his name thrown around, pushing that boulder up a hill for eternity. But what really screwed him wasn't just the punishment, it was the way he got there. Sisyphus was a master manipulator. He captured death itself, dodged consequences left and right, but it didn't last. The more he tried to avoid punishment, the worse it got. When the hammer finally came down, he was sentenced to a lifetime of futile effort. Now think of the people in your life who are always dodging responsibility. You help them now, but just like Sisyphus, they'll eventually face their own boulder. And it's going to be heavier because no one let them learn the hard lessons earlier. Let's talk about something that's probably happening right now in your own social circle. You're surrounded by people who are stuck. They aren't committed to real change, and what's worse, they drag you down with them. There's a whole social system at work. People are comfortable where they are, even if they say they want something better. They will resist anything or anyone that threatens their comfort zone. Maybe you've got that one friend who talks about getting in shape or going after a new job. But every time they're faced with a real challenge, they back off. And what do? You reassure them, say it's okay, maybe even help them dodge the discomfort. But the truth is, you're just keeping them in their own personal hell. Research backs this up. Studies show that overprotection, especially in childhood, leads to higher levels of anxiety and depression later on. Kids who are shielded from risks grow up without the tools to handle real-life challenges. This doesn't just apply to children. It's happening to the adults around you too. People who never face consequences don't develop resilience. A study on helicopter parenting found that young adults who were overprotected had lower self-control, higher narcissism, and struggled with coping. You think you're being helpful by stepping in, but all you're doing is reinforcing bad behavior, weakening their ability to stand on their own. Think about the workplace. That colleague who consistently avoids responsibility. Maybe they're not meeting deadlines, skipping out on work, or always needing a hand. And instead of letting them fall on their face, you pick up the slack. Studies show that people who are constantly bailed out become less competent over time. You're not just enabling them, you're crippling their growth. They never get the chance to adapt, to figure out how to manage challenges on their own. You might feel good in the moment, thinking you're helping someone, but you're really just adding fuel to the fire of their incompetence. The ancient myth of Phaethon takes this to another level. Phaethon wanted to prove his worth by driving his father's sun chariot across the sky. He was reckless and unprepared, but his father Helios let him do it anyway. And what happened? Phaethon lost control and scorched the earth, nearly burning everything to the ground. Helios could have stopped him, but he didn't. He thought he was giving Phaethon a chance to prove himself, but in reality, he allowed a disaster to unfold. Now look around you. How often have you let someone drive the chariot, knowing full well they weren't ready for it? That friend or family member who constantly screws things up. But you keep giving them another chance, hoping that this time it'll be different. It never is. In modern life, the consequences may not be as immediate as burning the earth to a crisp, but the long-term damage is undeniable. You're teaching them that it's okay to keep failing, because someone will always step in to fix it. The research echoes this. Studies on rewards and punishments show that when you reward bad behavior, even indirectly, it gets worse. People are less motivated to change when they know there are no real consequences. This is especially true with intrinsic motivation. Once someone is used to being bailed out, they stop trying to do better on their own. A study on rewards found that even when people are rewarded for undesirable behaviors, it reinforces those behaviors rather than discourages them. And that's exactly what happens when you keep saving someone from themselves. Then there's the story of King Acrisius and Perseus. Acrisius locked his daughter away to avoid a prophecy that said his grandson would kill him. He was so consumed by fear that he tried to control fate itself. But guess what? His actions didn't prevent the prophecy. They made it inevitable. Perseus was born, and Acrisius's attempts to dodge his destiny led to his own downfall. By trying to control the situation, Acrisius only ensured that his worst fears came true. How often do we try to control outcomes by protecting others from their own mistakes? You think you're doing them a favor, but you're just delaying the inevitable, making it worse in the process. Acrisius tried to shield himself, and it backfired, just like when you try to shield others from the fallout of their actions. It's going to backfire eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it's coming. Research supports this. The longer you protect someone from the consequences of their actions, the more entrenched their bad habits become. In fact, studies show that overprotection leads to decreased competence and a lower sense of autonomy. People who are constantly rescued from their own mistakes never learn how to deal with the challenges of life. And that's on you. Every time you swoop in to save them, you're reinforcing their helplessness. The truth is, you're not doing anyone any favors by shielding them from the consequences of their behavior. You're not helping them grow. You're not teaching them resilience. And you're certainly not protecting them from future failures. What you're doing is enabling a cycle of incompetence, weakness, and failure that will only get worse over time. Sisyphus tried to avoid his punishment, and look where it got him. Phaethon's father tried to give him a chance, and it nearly destroyed the world. Acrisius thought he could lock away his problems, and it only sealed his fate. You might think you're being helpful, but the longer you protect someone from the consequences of their actions, the more damage you're doing to them and to yourself. Let people face their own boulders. Stop stepping in, stop making excuses, and stop letting bad behavior slide. Because the truth is, sometimes the best help you can give someone is letting them fail. Now let's take this deeper. You see, people aren't just passively waiting for a handout, they're expecting it. It's built into their mindset, and that's the real trap. When you consistently bail someone out, you're not just helping them avoid consequences, you're teaching them to expect it, to feel entitled to it. You've conditioned them to believe that someone else will always catch them when they fall. That's how these toxic dynamics start. There's a dangerous pattern here. The more you help, the more they expect. Suddenly, you're no longer just a friend or a family member. You're their safety net. They don't even try anymore because they know you'll be there to pick up the pieces. And let's be real, that's a burden you can't keep carrying. It'll crush you. This entitlement creates a ripple effect that reaches every part of their life. In the workplace, they'll underperform, knowing someone will cover for them. In relationships, they'll keep making the same mistakes because they've never had to deal with the consequences. And it spreads. This mindset infects others around them. It becomes an entire system of people avoiding responsibility, avoiding growth. Before you know it, you're part of a cycle where no one is accountable, and nothing changes. And here's the kicker. It starts to feel good to you. There's a part of you that feels virtuous for helping, for stepping in. You convince yourself that you're doing the right thing. Maybe you feel a sense of pride, thinking you're the only one holding it all together. But that's a lie. What you're really doing is feeding your own ego at the expense of someone else's growth. It's a temporary high that leaves everyone worse off in the end. Think about it like this. You're building them a house with no foundation. It looks fine on the surface, but one day, the storm is going to hit, and when it does, everything will collapse because you didn't let them build it themselves. That's the moment when you realize that all your help was just a band-aid on a wound that needed stitches. They needed to struggle, they needed to fail, they needed to learn. But you stole that from them. This is where the research comes in strong. Studies have shown that when you constantly intervene, it stunts personal development. People don't grow, they don't adapt, they don't become self-sufficient. Overprotected children grow up to be anxious adults with no real coping mechanisms. They end up feeling trapped because they've never learned to navigate life's challenges on their own. This is exactly what happens when you protect adults from their mistakes. You're raising emotional children who never mature, who never face reality, who never take ownership of their lives. Now let's go back to the tale of Phaethon. He didn't know what he was asking for when he wanted to drive the sun chariot. He was reckless, ignorant, and desperate for validation. His father, Helios, knew better. Helios knew Phaethon wasn't ready, but he let him try anyway. Why? Because sometimes you have to let people fail. But here's the twist. If Helios had stepped in to save Phaethon halfway through, it wouldn't have made things better. It would have prolonged the disaster. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let someone burn out. Let them hit the ground so they can pick themselves up, if they're capable of it. Helios's decision may seem cruel, but it's a reflection of reality. Life doesn't save you halfway through a bad decision. The consequences are coming, whether you like it or not. The problem is, when you step in, you're acting like you have the power to stop it. You don't. You're just delaying the inevitable. Phaethon's crash was going to happen either way, and so is theirs. And don't fool yourself into thinking that you're above it. When you keep enabling someone, you're part of the problem. You're making yourself a slave to their dysfunction. And trust me, there's nothing noble about that. You end up resenting them, feeling trapped in a role you never wanted, while they continue to make bad decisions with no consequences. This is where it all leads. If you're not committed to real change yourself, you'll attract people who aren't either. People who will pull you down, keep you stuck, and make sure you never rise above the level of comfort they're drowning in. You've seen it happen, you've felt it happen, and you know it's not sustainable. But here's the thing. Avoiding this entire mess isn't about doing more. It's about doing less. It's about stepping back. It's about not letting yourself get sucked into their drama, their dysfunction, their mess. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to let them sink. So next time someone's bad decisions come knocking at your door, remember this. You're not helping them by protecting them. You're only hurting them and yourself. Walk away. Let them fail. Let them face the consequences of their choices. Because in the end, you're not their savior, and they're not your responsibility. And that's the brutal truth. Walking away doesn't make you a villain. In fact, it might be the most merciful thing you can do. Why? Because every time you let someone off the hook, you're letting them believe that their bad behavior, their poor choices, their laziness, none of it matters. You're telling them, it's okay, someone else will always be there to pick up the pieces. But that's not life. The world doesn't work like that, and deep down, they know it. They just haven't had to face it yet. Not because life has been kind to them, but because you've been shielding them from it. And all that's done is create a person who's even more vulnerable to the harsh realities that are coming their way. You've seen the research, the studies are crystal clear. Overprotection leads to a lack of coping skills, lower life satisfaction, and, in the worst cases, a dependency on others that cripples any chance at real independence. Imagine this. You're building a fortress around them, thinking you're keeping the wolves at bay. But here's what you don't realize. The fortress isn't keeping them safe. It's keeping them weak. Every time they look out, they see you standing guard, and they grow more and more dependent. The wolves, they're not going away. They're just circling, waiting for the day you step aside. And on that day, the fortress collapses because it was never built for defense. It was built to hide them from reality. This is the same trap King Acrisius fell into. He thought locking his daughter in a bronze tower would protect him from the prophecy that he could outsmart fate by controlling the circumstances around him. But guess what? The gods laughed. Zeus still found his way in, and Perseus, was stillborn. By trying to control the uncontrollable, Acrisius only guaranteed that the very thing he feared would happen. It's the same with people who try to control the chaos in someone else's life. You think you're helping, you think you're saving them, but really, you're just ensuring that the crash will be harder when it inevitably comes. And here's where it hits hard. This isn't just about them. It's about you. The person you become when you're stuck in someone else's mess. You lose yourself. You start compromising your own values, your own goals, just to keep them afloat. You're not just wasting time. You're wasting potential. And for what? So they can keep making the same mistakes? So they can drag you down with them? You know better. You've seen how this plays out, and it never ends well. Here's the hard pill to swallow. By protecting people from the consequences of their actions, you're not just stalling their growth, you're sabotaging your own. You're keeping yourself in a cycle of frustration, resentment, and stagnation. You can't move forward if you're always looking back, making sure someone else is keeping up. You can't climb the mountain if you're carrying someone who refuses to walk. Think about the story of Sisyphus. He thought he could cheat death, manipulate the system, and get away with it. But in the end, what did he get? An eternity of pushing a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down, over and over again. That's what you're doing when you shield someone from their own mistakes. You're pushing their boulder up the hill for them, and when it rolls back down, you're left picking it up again, while they stand there, watching, learning nothing. And you know what? At some point, you're going to get tired. You're going to realize that you've been stuck in this never-ending cycle, wasting your energy on someone who's never going to change, as long as you're there to clean up their mess. That's the real tragedy here. It's not just their failure, it's your wasted potential. So here's the bottom line. Stop saving people from themselves. Stop thinking you're the hero in their story. You're not. You're a crutch. And until you let them fall, until you let them hit rock bottom, they're never going to learn how to stand on their own. And neither are you. So what do? You step back. You let the chips fall where they may. You let them experience the consequences of their actions, even if it means watching them stumble. It feels cold, harsh even, but it's the most merciful thing you can do. Not just for them, but for yourself. You stop feeding the cycle. You stop playing the role of the protector, the fixer, the enabler. You break free from the trap, and for the first time in a long time, you can focus on your own path without the weight of someone else dragging behind you. You know, there's something fascinating about the research on overprotection. Kids raised by helicopter parents. Parents who swoop in at the first sign of trouble, who shield them from every risk, every challenge, don't turn out to be more resilient. They don't grow into confident adults who can handle whatever life throws at them. They become the opposite, anxious, dependent, and incapable of dealing with even the smallest setback. Why? Because they've never been allowed to fail. They've never had to face the consequences of their actions. And that's what you're doing when you constantly shield someone from their own destructive behavior. You're the helicopter parent, even if it's to someone your own age. And the consequences aren't just personal, they're social. You see, when you prop someone up who refuses to stand on their own, you're participating in a system that rewards bad behavior. It's like feeding a stray dog that keeps biting people. You think you're being kind, but all you're doing is enabling the damage. Studies have shown that when you reward bad behavior, whether it's through attention, forgiveness, or resources, you're essentially encouraging it to continue. The more you protect someone from the consequences of their laziness, their recklessness, or their dishonesty, the more they believe they can get away with it. And let's be honest, how many times have you seen that exact situation play out? How many times have you bailed someone out, only for them to go right back to the same destructive habits? It's not a coincidence. It's a pattern, and you're part of it. Look at the story of Phaethon, the son of Helios, the god of the sun, who begged his father to let him drive the sun chariot across the sky. Despite the warnings, despite being told he wasn't ready, Phaethon insisted. He wanted the glory, the validation, the thrill of it all. And what happened? He lost control, scorched the earth, and nearly destroyed everything in his path. In the end, Zeus had to step in and strike him down to prevent further destruction. That's the reality of unchecked ambition, of allowing someone to take the reins when they're not ready. It's not just about them. It's about the damage they cause to everyone else when they crash and burn. And if you keep letting people take the chariot without consequence, don't be surprised when everything around them gets scorched in the process. This is exactly what happens when we ignore the signs, when we don't step back and let people face the music. They hurt not just themselves, but everyone around them. You see, enabling isn't just about giving someone a pass. It's about ignoring the damage they cause, pretending like it's not your problem because you're just trying to help. But that's the lie. You're not helping. You're perpetuating the chaos, and eventually it's going to spiral out of control. The solution isn't more involvement, it's less. The solution is stepping back and letting people deal with the fallout of their own decisions. Not because you want to see them fail, but because you know it's the only way they'll ever learn. It's the only way they'll ever grow. And the truth is, if they're not willing to pick themselves up after the fall, then maybe they were never going to stand on their own in the first place. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop playing the role of protector? Are you ready to stop rewarding the very behaviors that are dragging you and everyone else down? Because if you are, then it's time to make a change. It's time to step aside and let the chips fall where they may. Not out of cruelty, but out of a deep understanding that real growth comes from real consequences. And the sooner you stop shielding people from their own failures, the sooner they and you can start moving forward. In the end, it's about recognizing the truth, both for yourself and for those around you. If you're constantly stepping in to save someone, you're not just prolonging their suffering, you're prolonging yours. You're tied to their failures, their shortcomings, and their refusal to take ownership of their life. The weight you carry isn't just emotional, it's physical, spiritual, mental. It drags you down, chips away at your own growth, and clouds your path forward. And for what? For the fleeting satisfaction of feeling needed? For the brief illusion that you're making a difference? It's time to see things for what they are. Just like Sisyphus, condemned to push that boulder up the hill for eternity, never making progress, never breaking free. This is the life you've signed up for, if you keep protecting others from their own consequences. You're stuck in a cycle, pushing, struggling, trying to fix things that aren't yours to fix. And just like Sisyphus, the weight of it will crush you, day by day, if you don't let go. The world is full of people who will drag you down if you let them. People who thrive off your protection, who take and never give back. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just laziness, selfishness, or the inability to change. But it doesn't matter why. It matters that it's happening. And the more you protect them, the more they expect it. The more entitled they become to your energy, your time, your sacrifice. You're not a savior. And it's not your job to fix everyone else's mess. Let that sink in. You can't protect people from their own poor decisions, nor should you try. That's their path, not yours. Your path is your own, and every minute you spend cleaning up someone else's mess is a minute you could be investing in your own growth, your own freedom. So stop. Stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. Stop pretending that shielding them is helping. It's not. And when you finally step back, when you let them fall, when you stop playing the role of the eternal protector, something incredible happens. You free yourself. You break the chains. You allow yourself the space to focus on what really matters. Your own progress, your own goals, your own peace of mind. And when you do that, when you truly let go of the weight of others' failures, you'll be amazed at how light you feel. You'll realize that you were never responsible for their growth, and that by stepping back, you're giving them the only chance they have to truly change. It's not cruelty. It's the highest form of love. The kind of love that says, I believe you can do better, but I'm not going to do it for you. So take that step back. Let them face the consequences. And finally, free yourself from the burden of trying to fix what was never yours to fix in the first place. That's where real growth begins. That's where true freedom lies, for both of you.